All right, Steeler fans, welcome back to the Monday podcast. And that means it's time for the Monday morning conversation. Every Monday during the offseason, I have a guest on. Sometimes they're beat writers, sometimes they're fellow fans. It's exactly what I have today with Smitty, Zachary Smith of Around the 412. And you've heard him on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with Alan Saunders, both a part of the Fans First Sports Network. Smitty, welcome to the show. How are you?
Jeff, my man, I appreciate you having me. Excited for this, and excited for the off season. I feel like we're kind of past that the most dead period of football, right? Like we
Yeah.
got free agency coming up, then the draft, and then things just keep rolling until we hit training camp. Before we know it, we'll be kicking off the season again.
You're absolutely right. In this NFL wheel, in this tire, whatever you call it, once it gets moving, like it's so tough. It never
Mhm.
stops. It's always in motion. And I thought that it was appropriate today talking to another fan. This is not, I've had several beat writers on and people that cover the team that are in the locker room. And let's be honest, sometimes they have to be a little guarded with their thoughts and emotions about the team. They have to kind of walk that neutral stance. You would not fall into that category. And I want to talk with you a little bit about last season before we jump ahead to this season. To tell everyone out there who's listening, I gave him a little bit of a heads up about this question. I didn't want to put him on the spot. And I said, I want you to sum up the 2023 season in one sentence. I gave you some time. What'd you come up with?
Kennywood does not have the only steel curtain roller coaster in Pittsburgh.
That's pretty good. I like that. And I guess my question, I thought about this a lot too, because I knew I was going to ask you the question. I knew I was going to start this way. You kind of hinted at where I want to go. My sentence was actually a question, and that is, was it really that bad?
Okay. Yeah.
Because when you think about it, was it a roller coaster season? Yes. No one that watched it would deny that. They did win 10 games. They
Mhm.
went 5-1 in the division. Sure,
Yeah.
we were left with more questions than answers at season's end. At 10-7, you get into the wild card. You got to go to Buffalo. The game gets delayed because of a blizzard in Buffalo. I mean, that's a tough place. So let me ask you that question. Let me see if you can answer my question before we go back to your sentence. Do you think 2023 was as bad as some people are making it out to be?
No, I think that a lot of that sentiment is just based in the fact that we didn't get a, long-term answer at quarterback, because if
Yeah.
you look on the surface, it's just the record that the team had, the postseason outcome. I think that is probably where, like, most people would have predicted this team to be before the season, even if we did get a second-year leap from Kenny Pickett. Like, the overall result was pretty much, I think, the same as most people would think. But when you don't have the quarterback, the most important position, take that leap, and we're still stuck here with our wheel spinning, trying to figure out, should we go into a third season with Kenny Pickett, or should we be looking at taking a different swing at the position? I think that's probably why people have, the position that they do with this team, thinking that, like, this team isn't even anywhere close, despite coming off a 10-win season.
So let's go to your sentence.
Yeah.
The Kennywood is not the only steel curtain
Yeah.
roller coaster. Ebbs and flows, ups and downs. What were some positives that you took away from 2023? We know the negatives. Those are glaring. I mean,
Mhm.
gosh, just open up a social media app and you'll find plenty of negatives about last season. What were some positives, though?
I think you start with the rookie class. I mean,
Yeah.
anytime that you get the contributions that you do from such a young group, and honestly, that the offense as a whole was such a young group, for those guys to play the amount of snaps that they did together, and, injury obviously playing a role at the quarterback position in some other spots, but, like, it's such a young unit, and for those guys to primarily be able to stick together and go through that together and come on strong as they did at the end, obviously, once Canada was out and stuff like that. But yeah, specifically with the rookie class is honestly what I would look at first. You look at the contributions from Broderick Jones getting on the field once he did. Joey Porter Jr., obviously, can't say enough about what that pick turned into in year one. Keanu Benton flying under the radar, in my opinion, in terms of what he was able to contribute. And I'm super excited about him. Heck, like even Darnell Washington, I know that they didn't use him as a pass catcher, but, like, he was what we thought he would be, as a third round draft pick in his rookie year as an extra blocker, basically acting as another offensive lineman. Nick Herbig, fantastic contributions on special teams, and when he saw the field on defense, definitely made the most of it and could definitely see an increased role if they don't bring back, like, a Marcus Golden on a 1-year deal. Even if they do, maybe Herbig is the 3 instead of the 4 in terms of pass rushers this year. So for me, man, a lot of the optimism comes from the draft class and thinking, okay, if Omar and Andy could do that, who's to say they can't do that yet again in the
Yeah.
2024 draft?
Would you lump the running game, and I guess that includes the offensive line and their run blocking, into a positive from last season, or were you not that enthralled with it?
Um, no, I would. I think similarly to, I will say I was a little surprised that it started off as slow again this year, because I really thought at the end of last year, the way that they had come on, that they would kind of just carry it right over,
Mhm.
especially when you talk about the addition of an Isaac Seumalo, and then you spend the first round pick on Broderick. I know he didn't get in the lineup right away, but I thought that it would even start out better than it did. But it was once again a thing where as the season went on, they got better. Najee Harris seems to just get better as the season goes on too, and maybe that's just a product of like the type of runner and style that he is. Like even in games, he gets better as it gets into the third and fourth quarter. But as the season gets into its third and fourth quarter, he's even getting better there. And I think that we all understand how important Jaylen Warren is to this offense at this point too. I think there were some people that were maybe like, what is he really? Was it maybe just a mirage last year? I don't think that there's any question that he's one of the more important pieces on this offense after doing it again and looking even better in a second year. So yeah, I definitely think that the running game is a positive that you can take away too. And that's why it's so hard, man, to like evaluate this offensive line, because I like what they do in run blocking, but then it's like in pass protection, like how do you weigh that? Like how do
Yeah.
you look at this unit and say, man, they're such good run blockers, but they're not enough good pass blockers to like say that we don't need to upgrade there.
And a lot of that came, in my opinion, and I'm no expert. I'm not an X's and O's guy. I'm a commentary guy. But I will
Sure.
say, if you have two eyes and you're watching the Steelers, you saw subpar center play. And if your
Oh,
center is getting blown off the ball in pass protection, that
yeah.
everything else breaks down. Now James Daniels and Sayamalu are having to worry about the guy that's coming right up the gut at your quarterback, and then it just throws
Mhm.
everything off. So I think the release of Mason Cole is gonna, well, it's not going to be an answer. We won't know anything until they actually get on the field next season. But I think that was a good first step for the Steelers, at least acknowledging that there are some aspects of the offensive line outside of continuity. Everyone talked about that last season. Well, the starting five are going to return. That doesn't mean the
Mhm.
starting five were great. Hell, they had Chooks, Okorafor, and Dan Moore as your tackles. Like, that's not great. Yes, they
Yeah.
all came back, and yes, they played all but like 3 snaps together last season, but that doesn't mean that they're not, without needing of an upgrade. And I think they still do need an upgrade, not just filling that center position. We'll talk about that for sure as we look into next year. But one more question about last season. And I'd have to ask, as a fan, where are you in this Kenny Pickett situation? Do you stand, like, do you think that Pickett, because honestly, it's really crazy. There are very few people I feel like out there, maybe you're one of them, that are like me that say, you know what? If he turns out to be good, awesome. If he doesn't, that's fine. Let's move on. But I don't stand in a camp like I'm pro Pickett, anti Pickett. There's such stark camps that people, very
Sure.
few people like me are standing on the fence saying, y'all look kind of stupid. Where do you stand?
That's I think I'm on the fence with you. I don't know how strong this fence is, but if we're both able to stand on it, I'd be on it with you. Because, like, yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, I think the argument can be made pretty much in any direction, and I'll hear
Right.
all of it. I think that they should be certainly, open to anything. Now, whether or not that actually comes to fruition is a different case. But like, I think when you're talking about going into year 3 without knowing, that means you have to be, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but at least like in the market to look for potential upgrades. Now, what is out there that is actually feasible? They're not going to throw $40 million a season at Kirk Cousins. They're not going to give up a high draft pick for a quarterback. Is Russell Wilson at the minimum worth it to bring in for some competition? And maybe like, is that considered competition? I would think so. But I think that, and it's I don't want to say unfortunate for Kenny, but like it kind of is, that he looked like an actual NFL quarterback for about 6 quarters up until that injury that happened in Arizona post Matt Canada. And that was the whole point of firing Canada, was because you weren't seeing him take steps, Kenny, that is,
Yeah.
under his tutelage. And, to not be able to see what that development for the rest of the season could have looked like was really unfortunate, because maybe he would have turned a corner. I don't know. And maybe he's going to turn a corner next season. I think that one of the benefits of bringing Arthur Smith in to this is that, man, his offense just has like certain guardrails built into it for the quarterback. It makes life really easy, which is, a completely different question that we can get into. But I'm with you in that I don't necessarily stand very firm on anything with the quarterback position. If they go into the year with Kenny and it works out, great, because the best solution to this whole thing is Kenny is the guy, and
Yes.
you're not having to continue to question it.
Absolutely.
Worst case scenario is, okay, you know what? You spent a first round pick on the guy a couple seasons ago. You didn't give up any extra capital to do it. You're not paying a long term contract yet. You cut bait and you start over at the position, whatever.
Yeah. And honestly, this is common thread with fans in general. They never want to really blame the organization. They like to go after the players. They blame the
Oh
players
man.
for everything, and no one ever bats an eye when a player that has a 3 deal gets released. But if a player says, I'd like a new deal, they're like, oh, you're so selfish. In this case, talking about Kenny Pickett, the Matt Canada situation, the Steelers screwed
Mhm.
themselves. They screwed
Yes.
themselves bringing Matt Canada back. And I even said
Mhm.
this on my podcast a bunch of times that if they go down this road, it's going to be really tough to come back from because you're going to draft players that are for the scheme. Now you're wondering, is Calvin Austin capable of doing more than a jet sweep? All this stuff that
Yeah.
he was drafted for. And they could have had all last season with a new coordinator to really find out what they have in Kenny Pickett. Instead, they waited till midseason. We all know what happens when he gets fired. Pickett gets hurt. He loses the job, doesn't come back when healthy. And now that is this huge question mark moving into next season. So the Steelers kind of painted themselves into this corner, and
Yeah.
now they're having to try and figure a way out. But I don't know. For me, like you said, best case scenario for the Steelers is that Kenny Pickett's the guy. And people will hate it, and because I don't know, they guess they just want to be right. But
Yeah.
they'll hate it if they don't like Kenny Pickett for whatever reason. They didn't want him drafted in 2023. They think he has small hands. He went to Pitt. Who knows all the reasons that are out there for why people hate Kenny Pickett? But I don't know. Do you think Mason Rudolph will come back in 2024?
I don't. I don't know what it is. Like, I just feel like until like the organization can say whatever they want in terms of wanting him back, he can say whatever he wants. I don't see it. Like, I just think that he's gonna want a different opportunity. They didn't get like it literally took Mitch Trubisky literally throwing the season away for him to actually be given a chance to play. And I know what he did down the stretch, and it's a very small sample size. I just think for both parties, it would be good to get a fresh start. Like if he wants to go somewhere and actually compete for a job, they can say it's an open competition, and I'm not going to believe that either. Like I think Kenny Pickett is the starter until we literally see somebody else do it. So I just think for him, he could probably go somewhere else. And I'm not saying he's going to compete for a starting job, but at least know that he's a backup somewhere, as opposed to the Steelers basically sticking him into a 3 spot and again saying, yeah, you're not playing unless literally every possible thing goes wrong for us this year. I don't think that
Yeah.
that's another situation that he's going to want to come back into. I do think that we see somebody of that like ilk be brought into the organization, whether it is a Ryan Tannehill or Jacoby Brissett. I just don't think that he is the veteran backup that's going to provide competition. I just think that it makes it a little bit more messy than it needs to be if he is the guy that's brought back into it.
I agree with that. Now, you mentioned Arthur Smith being hired as the
Yeah.
offensive coordinator and the guardrails that are set up for the quarterback position. Do you have hope with him coming in as the offensive coordinator? And he has a track record, something Matt Canada didn't have in the National Football League. Are you hopeful
Yeah.
that he'll be able to right the ship and get something out of this unit? And I say unit, not because it's not just about the quarterback. It's about the running game. It's about the offensive line being better, utilizing position players like Pat Freiermuth, who when he was healthy was even non-existent within the offense. Are you hopeful with Arthur Smith?
I am. And that's the thing that like I'm having conversations with people about him being the offensive coordinator and saying like, okay, it's not even necessarily expecting that he's going to then go and get the most out of Kenny Pickett. He's not like a quarterback guru or anything like that, but he makes it easier for the quarterback
Mhm.
position within his offense. I just think what he's going to be able to do for the run game, I really enjoy a lot of the run concepts that he does. Now, it is a different type of run scheme than the Steelers have run in the past, so I'm interested to see like how that translates for them going to more of like a zone run based concept as opposed to the power gap stuff. Um, but I am hopeful for what it can do for those guys. I think this is a better offense for George Pickens. Really curious about the fit for Deontay Johnson. I don't necessarily think that he fits this offense the best way that he could. But in terms of what they're going to be able to do, on the ground, a lot of the play action stuff, taking more deep shots down the field when they do go to the air. I do think that this is probably the best case scenario in terms of sheltering, for lack of a better word, the quarterback play. And I don't know if this is an admission on their part about the quarterback position and the play that they've gotten there. But again, I just think it makes life so much easier within this offense for the quarterback.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. We'll put it that way. So we talked about the quarterback position. What are some of the
Mhm.
other team needs that you have heading into 2024? Like, where else do they rank?
Well, you mentioned center. I mean, they don't like if the season started right now, James Daniels or Nate Herbig is the starting center.
Yeah,
That does not sound very good to me.
no,
James Daniels was actually a pretty good center in Chicago, but he hasn't done it recently. Like,
right.
if they were planning on him actually ever being at that position, you would think that they would have had him actually snapping the ball at some point, and that hasn't happened. So, and then Nate Herbig, man, when you look at the, going back to the Arthur Smith stuff, he doesn't fit to me just in terms of, the athleticism that is required at the center position in Arthur Smith's offense. I just can't see him being the guy. So centers for sure. We've talked about the tackle situation, whether you're moving Broderick to left or keeping him at right, you need another tackle. Cornerback for sure. You need somebody opposite of Joey Porter Jr. Don't know what the situation is going to be like with Patrick Peterson, but regardless there of what you're going to do with him, you need somebody else. So definitely there. Linebacker, they could use a solution. It would have been easier for you to ask me what they don't need, in my opinion. Linebacker, they need something. Safety, they need something. But really, when I could like the defensive backs as a whole, I think you looked at last year and they were allowing a ton of splash plays, but it wasn't even like they were getting the top taken off of them. It was they were getting stretched sideline to sideline and didn't have the athletes to be able to keep up with these guys on crossing routes. So I look at corner, tackle, and defensive backs. Honestly, probably is my top three. If we're not including the quarterback position because we just assume that they're going to go forward with Kenny Pickett.
I agree with it. Now, do you tend to be a guy as a fan that thinks, hey, we need to focus on the draft? That's all the way the Steelers have always said they're going to build the team is through the draft. Do you fall in line with that thought process? Or are you more of a, hey, we need to go get some proven commodities in free agency by getting some veterans and not always leaning on the rookie class? Which side do you like there?
Ooh, man, I got to get back on that same fence I think that I was on with the quarterback because I think you need both. I think that you got to be able to use the draft primarily, but supplement that with free agency. And I think that this year is a great case because if I'm looking at the free agency class, what there is, and I'm looking at the draft specifically and trying to combine them, marry the idea of both of them, look at the positions that are really strong in both those. I'm not even touching the safeties that are available in the draft because I like the free agency class so much in terms, and you can get a starting safety, go sign Jordan Whitehead for a couple $1 million and pair him next to Minkah Fitzpatrick. And then, you're checking off a box that you don't need to take in the draft because you have limited draft capital there as well. With center, I can see them double dipping. I think that you need to sign somebody. You're not going to go into, like I said, you're not going to go into the draft basically telegraphing to everybody, hey, we're taking the center at 20 because we don't have one on the roster right now. So that is a position where I could see them double dipping. I'm curious though, is it somebody that is like a starter capable center, like Aaron Brewer, who has the connections to Arthur Smith playing center in Tennessee when Arthur Smith was there? Are they going to go like that route, or is it like another, Mason Cole type route that they're going to go looking for? It's just, that guy wouldn't be $5 million that Mason Cole would have been. Right. And then I look at like tackle. That is a position for the draft for me because I do not like the free agent class. So I guess it's more on a year by year, case by case basis in terms of that. But I definitely overall agree with the Steelers' philosophy of building through the draft and supplementing here and there with free agency, just because of, the contracts. You hit on guys in the draft on those rookie contracts. You can't beat that as opposed to overspending in free agency.
Sometimes I see the Steelers and they'll make a lot of these second, third, fourth tier signings in free agency. And they kind of hope that they're finding something that maybe they can develop a player that another team couldn't. Very rarely do those pan out. And so there's a part of me that is like, you know what? If you saved all the money that you signed 4 guys, why don't you go out and get someone that's a little bit more of a proven commodity? Maybe be more in. I mean, think about last season as an example. Who was the big signing on day one? Patrick Peterson. They got an aging cornerback, and we're supposed to be super pumped about that. That would be like them saying we're going to sign Terrell Edmonds back on day one of free agency on March 13th. Like the fan base would be like, well, okay, but is this really the marquee signing? This is the day one guy you're going to go out and get? I don't know. We'll see. But the draft is what everyone focuses on now because obviously the combine just wrapped up. I want to ask you what your thoughts are on the combine. Are you a big combine guy? Are you who have the Steelers met with formally, informally? Or are you just kind of like, it is what it is. It's just one of the stepping stones.
It's kind of just like added information to me. I'm not letting it like play into my decisions of anything or like putting too much credence into it. Listen, I will, and I don't know how the listeners of this show are going to feel about me mentioning this name, but I almost look at it like PFF, where it's like, okay, additional information, but it's not really going to play into the way that I see things necessarily. Right. And that's again, like, a person by person basis, how much stock you want to put into things. But yeah, with the combine, like the tape still matters. The tape still is going to tell me what I need to know for the most part about these players. I think honestly for me, it's more about the medical stuff necessarily over the testing stuff. Like you look at Kool-Aid McKinstry, who popped up with the Jones fracture yesterday, all of a sudden. A guy that I think, say that there was like a huge run on tackles or something before 20. Maybe Kool-Aid McKinstry would have been in play for 20. I don't think that that's the case now. I don't think he's going to go in the first round based off of this. So, I would say that the medical stuff means more to me than anything else. Maybe in terms of like the 40 and stuff like that, you're looking for like confirmation on things that you
Yeah.
already felt, but it's not going to be the number one deciding factor for me in terms of anything.
Well, it's like Clemson cornerback Nate Wiggins runs a great 40 and
Sure. Yeah.
pops his groin in the
And I
process.
saw, and I'm curious to your thoughts on him because I saw like a lot of Steelers fans talking about him. He was actually, I think Mel Kiper's latest mock had him
He was.
for the
Yeah.
Steelers. I don't get it. Like I think out of the corners at the top of the class, he is the one that makes the least sense for the Steelers. Obviously hyper athletic, track star speed, but primarily zone corner. Played very few snaps at Clemson his entire career there, and press man or any type of man coverage. Honestly, and also just like he never really was like a guy that was coming downhill in the run game.
Yeah.
And like the Steelers do not want corners that aren't going to help out in terms of run game. So like I thought that it's a really bad fit, and for them specifically, I think he's a great player. Just for the Steelers, I didn't see the fit, and I saw a lot of people talking about it like, oh, maybe he slides now or something like that. Personally, I'm not even that interested.
I mean, well, I don't even know what the Steelers do anymore because they used to be primarily zone, and that's what
Mhm.
the Tampa 2, that's what Mike Tomlin always does because it's how he likes to coach them up, and Terrell Austin falls in line because the head coach is a defensive coach. But now it seems like they are trending more towards a man press. I mean, Joey Porter Jr. is not a
Yeah,
zone guy. He is
right.
I'm going to jam you at the line, be
Well,
super physical. And so, yeah, it doesn't, I don't even know what the hell the Steelers want anymore in a
I
defensive
I
back.
think that's what they want. I just think when you looked at the roster last year, they couldn't do it. Like, that's why
Yeah.
I think they wanna get more guys of the Joey Porter Jr. mold to be able to play like that, and that's why I think a guy I don't know if they're gonna be able to get their hands on him, but, like, L'Jarius Sneed would have been a perfect fit had he hit unrestricted free agency and you didn't have to give up a draft pick and
Yeah.
also then negotiate a long-term deal, but, like, perfect fit for the Steelers if he would have hit the open market. A guy like that, would have made sense, and there we go. There would have been a free agent splash that we're trying to talking
Oh, yeah.
about.
A
But,
big splash.
I just think when you look at the roster last year, they realized we can't do like they were basically playing half field zone and half field man because of the personnel that they had. But I don't think that they want that to be the case. I think they would rather get more guys like Joey Porter Jr. in here to be able to play a lot of press man.
For sure, and you think about the combine, and so you have, like, Wiggins, I don't know what he does to his groin, if it was a strain, if it was a pop or whatever, that's gonna
I
be an
think they're saying like a
issue,
hip flexor.
something like that, and then it's
Yeah.
all in the same region of the human
Hmm.
anatomy, but then you have Caleb Williams, who's not even gonna share his medicals with teams and stuff.
Hmm.
To me, the combine is just more about red flags than anything else. It's more of "That guy ran what?"
Yeah.
This guy said what? He's gonna do what? Like Caleb Williams, potentially a
Mm.
first overall
Yeah.
pick, and he's not gonna throw. So quarterback's not gonna throw to someone without any defense. Just show off your arm. Just to show us everything you can do. He's not gonna throw, not gonna test really, and he's only gonna be there for interviews, but he's not gonna share his medical information. Hello, that's a red flag. So to me, that's what I take
And
from the
Marvin
combine.
Harrison didn't even speak to the media. Like Caleb Williams
Yeah.
spoke to the media. Marvin didn't even do that. I don't know. I'm not going to necessarily like cast judgment there. I'm not sure if there was something, a reason that like I don't even know if he's still there. Did he leave after not speaking to the media? I'm not sure.
If there's a
But
reason,
yeah,
my agent better be telling everyone under the
yeah,
sun why I didn't speak. If
sure.
we're talking about it now, why didn't he speak? Then his
Hmm.
agent should be fired. So, but that's a red flag. Like, what the hell are you doing, man? Just go and answer some stupid questions. One guy got asked. I saw on Twitter that, "Do you believe in planes?" What the hell are you talking?
I know,
Who is
dude.
asking
Yeah,
these questions?
I was talking with Alan and Derek and stuff about this, and they were like, "Yeah, dude, people they're gonna start restricting credential access probably starting next year with some of these questions that have been asked."
Jeez. How do they get in there? That's what I want to know. We got denied
Yeah,
at Fans First Sports Network. How do these people get in there? I would not ask this question.
no,
All
no,
right, all right. Let's go to a question I think is really difficult for a lot of fans to answer, and that is, with the new league year approaching, March 13th, starting the new league year, tampering starts on the 11th. Do you trust this organization to be able to get the job done and get over this proverbial hump that they seem to struggle with? Do you trust the coach, the GM, and the owner? I mean, we know the NFLPA, the results are out. They do not trust Art Rooney II in terms of the players and the families and stuff like that. They do trust Mike Tomlin. Where do you think, or do you trust them to be able to get the job done?
Oh man. Um, hmm. I've agreed, like, I've been in lockstep a lot in terms of the roster construction here, but again, it all comes down to quarterback. Like, we don't know if this group is able to identify quarterback yet, and that would be, obviously, you just mentioned red flags at the combine. That's obviously gonna be a huge red flag if for whatever
Yes.
reason, we're having this conversation again after next year where they still haven't found a solution at quarterback. Um they've only taken one swing at it, and it wasn't even Omar and Andy that took the swing at quarterback. They're kind of just still, rolling with the
Right.
guy that Kevin left them with in his last year. So I don't necessarily have a reason to believe that they can't. They just haven't yet. Um, Last year's draft class was just so good. Like, I just feel like if they can continue to stack those types of draft classes, man, we won't be having this conversation for very long. Ownership's a different question to me. Just because there's been a lot of conversation about this recently. Like, obviously, there's a cap on the amount that you can spend on players, but like that's it. You can spend as much money you want. This coaching staff should be way bigger than it is. They should have more coaches, more quality coaches as well on there. The training facilities, everything like that. Um, I'll say yes.
But your hesitation speaks
There's
volumes, and you're not
yes,
alone. You're not
no.
alone when the question is that is posed of, do you trust this organization to get it done?
Mhm,
And any fan would probably fall lockstep, like you said, with you. You just don't know. You trust one full season of the front office with Andy Weidel and Omar Khan at the helm,
mhm.
but they got really lucky last draft too. Darnell Washington,
I
who
mean, yeah,
everyone thought was a first round pick, slides to 3. Nick
yeah.
Herbig is there in 4. Joey
I
Porter,
if they got
everyone
if they
thought
got
was a
2 of
first
those
round pick.
guys if they got 2 of those guys, I think we would
Yeah.
be talking about, "Oh, they did a really good job there." But the contributions that they got from 5 different players
Oh
from that
yeah,
draft class, and, it's unfortunate. Who knows what Corey Trice could have been, because that
that's
was another
true.
guy that, and this is bringing my personal rankings and stuff into it. I graded him as a 3rd rounder last year. They got him in the 7th round. I was like, "This guy, I think, can play early." If nothing else, I thought he could have been a guy that you match up with tight ends when they're in the slot and
Yeah.
been like a tight end eraser. Similarly to anybody that, if you followed the Bengals when they won on their Super Bowl run, they had a guy, Trey Flowers, super long corner that specifically was given those types of matchups, tight ends when they were in the slot. And I was like, man, Corey Trice seems like a perfect fit for that. So I was excited about that pick. I thought top to bottom, they nailed the draft last year.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, if they landed 2 of those guys, we would have been talking about. So it is going to be hard for them to continue to repeat that year in and year out. And that's even not knowing how long Andy Weidel's going to be assistant GM. We could be having this conversation next year. A team could poach him, really like the work that he's
Sure.
done with Omar Khan, and take him from the organization. So I hope that's not the case. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a difficult question, man. Just because there's so many layers to this thing, and not a large body of work to look at least in terms of Omar and Andy. Certainly with Tomlin and the ownership, sure.
Let's finish this up with an interesting question. And my question is, what are your thoughts on the overall Steelers fan base? A lot of times
Mm,
we see the ugly of the ugly out there on social media and the people that literally go on these apps just to try and pick fights. But what's your take
sure.
on the Steelers fan base heading into 2024?
I love them. I think that they are super passionate, for better or for worse. But I think that what we see on social media sometimes isn't necessarily a reflection of what you are getting in general. And I
Yeah.
think that there's going to be those people within every fan base. It's just when you're talking about this fan base specifically, it is so large that, of course, you're going to have a larger number of those types of people within it. And I think it's a vocal minority that we see for the most part on social media. I go to season ticket holder, I'm at every game. I see this fan base week in and week out during Steelers season. And being in person with a lot of these people, it is absolutely nothing like what you see on social media, the representation on there, in my opinion. So I love Steelers fans, the best fans in the world, in my opinion. And I'm never going to knock people for their, passion, because I share a lot of it. I may not be as, much of a roller coaster of emotions on a game-to-game basis as most of them are, but I'm certainly within that realm.
Yeah, when you go to the even if you're a fan media type like we have with our own podcast
Yeah,
and stuff like that, some of that does get beaten out of you a little bit. You try to not ride the crazy roller coaster, but we do. We want them to win. We want them to succeed, and that's a very unique part of this whole business and the way that we do things. But the fan base, everyone that I've met in person, like you said, they just want the team to win. Like that's all they want. They just want a winner
I
because
I can
they've
appreciate
seen
that.
a
I
lot of
might not
success.
agree with their opinions in terms of how to get there,
Right,
but I
that's
can
true.
certainly
Yeah.
appreciate that we all have one common goal here, and it's to see the Steelers hoist the seventh Lombardi.
Yeah, I have questioned that a little bit in the recent past with the Kenny Pickett debates
Oh,
constantly raging,
sure,
and I'm like, "Do
yeah,
you really want this team to win?"
Well, no, no, no. They want them to be bad enough to get rid of Kenny first, and then
Yes.
get a different guy in here, and then they want to win.
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go. All right, hey, Schmitty, I thank you for taking the time. I want to give you a chance to plug what you're doing for Fans First Sports Network on multiple fronts in social media, all the stuff that you want to share. Go ahead and do that now.
so, yeah, Steelers Afternoon Drive with Alan Saunders. We've been on Fans First from the jump since we started doing the
Yeah.
podcast, during training camp. I wanna say July is when we first launched it. Alan Saunders and myself, Monday through Friday, goes up right around 5 o'clock PM for your drive home. We've really enjoyed doing that, and, it's been great. So, yeah, this whole last month, we were having guests on stuff. There's an episode with Jeff on the
Yep.
YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcast from, that you can go back and check that out. And then just as of last week, around the 412, my other podcast that I host with Tyler Weeks, join Fans First. We do separate episodes: Steelers, Penguins, Pirates. Those go up obviously on a weekly basis separately. And yeah, one other thing that I want to talk about. This isn't going on right now, but anytime somebody asks me to plug stuff that I'm doing, I always want to bring this up because it's the most important thing that we do. Launches in July and goes through Christmas. We do a Christmas mission called Rocking Around the 412, and we've raised over $30,000 since starting it in 2018. Every single penny that is donated goes directly to providing kids that otherwise would not have a Christmas with a Christmas that they deserve.
That's
So,
awesome.
starting 2 years ago, we started partnering up with the East Rochester Salvation Army and adopting kids off their angel tree. Last year, we were able to do that for 26 kids. So, thanks to the people that donate, 26 kids from the Salvation Army were able to have a Christmas that they otherwise would not have had. So, obviously, thank you to everybody that donates. That's not going on right now. I just wanted to bring that up here because you never know when somebody's going to end up listening or watching this episode. Just something to keep in mind. I launch the mission every year in July. And then you can find me at Zachary Smith PGH on all social medias. And Jeff, I can't thank you enough for giving me the time.
Well, hey, you let me know when you launch that thing, and I'm going to do
Okay.
whatever I can to help you all out, both on the podcast side, steelcurtainnetwork.com. I'll do an entire article about it to help drum up some support for you
Appreciate
guys
that.
because that's a good cause. And I do have to ask you before we go,
Yes.
because you do the around the 412. Am I
Mhm.
crazy for being a little excited for the Pirate season to start?
No, I don't think so. Listen, I am super excited about this team. And I think they're going to be
I
fun to
kind of
watch
am
at the very
too. And
least.
I'm
Like,
guarded, but I'm kind of
yeah.
excited.
I think you have every reason to be guarded because as am I. But I think that my only like trepidation is the rotation. Like I really like what
Yeah.
they got lineup wise. Basically across the board. A little bit of question, in my opinion, at first base, and it's a bummer about Andy Rodriguez at catcher
Yeah.
because I was super excited about him too. But like, I mean, Brian Hayes, what he did the last few months last year. I mean, the bat, let alone with the Gold Glove that he has, the bat was playing at an MVP level from
For sure.
basically the All-Star break on. Brian Reynolds coming off the big contract. If Jack Sawinski can be more consistent and take the next step, full season of O'Neal Cruz, healthy, hopefully coming back.
Jeez.
Henry Davis, and then hopefully like June-ish, we get Paul Skeens up here too to add to that
Yeah.
rotation. They just paid Mitch Keller, so my question is the amount of arms behind Mitch for the time
Yeah.
being until Skeens gets up here. But other than that, adding Aroldis Chapman to the bullpen with Bednar and Colin Holderman, Mlodzinski, I thought looked really good last year. I think there's reason for excitement. I'm just not there in terms of like necessarily playoff contention yet. But if they're in the mix and they get Paul Skeens up here and then add another arm maybe at the deadline and see that they are in
Yeah.
contention, I think that we're
Never know.
starting to get to that competitive window again, like we had from 13 to 15 at the very
The
least.
NL Central is there to be had, and so they'll be
Yeah.
in the mix. So give me meaningful games after the All-Star break, and I'll be happy. So,
Mhm.
all right, Schmitty, thank you so much for your time, man, and we'll be talking soon. Take it easy.
Yep. You too.